Agatha Christie's mysteries have kept millions of readers hooked over time. With more than 2 billion copies sold worldwide, she's one of the best-selling authors of the 20th century. But what is it that makes her stories so irresistible? It couldn't have been just luck. So in today's video I'm breaking down the secret formula behind her successful novels. From iconic characters to clever red herrings. Are you ready to uncover the tricks of the trade of the Queen of Crime herself? Let's dive in. Now, forward warning, this video might contain some minor spoilers. Books that I reference or use as an example of some of the techniques that she used. I will also be linking some extra reading material down below in the description box, so you can do your own research. Now first, let's talk the setting, the location. Now of course Agatha Christie used many locations across all of her books, and at the first glance they don't seem to have much in common. But if you look a bit closer, you might notice that they all share one major feature. Now, from a remote island in And Then There Were None, to a snowed-in train on the Orient Express, to a luxurious cruise liner on the Egyptian Nile. All of these settings introduced one singular and intense element. And that's isolation. By creating many of her mysteries, many of her stories in isolated settings, Agatha Christie almost gives them a claustrophobic feel. The idea of being locked up in a place together with a murderer. And this indeed is a very clever way of writing, because all of a sudden, all of the characters aren't just suspects anymore, they are also potential victims. All of a sudden, the game is on, and we as readers share that feeling of dread as the characters do by simply knowing that there is a murderer amongst them. Amongst these strangers, who will be the next and who will be the murderer? And even when a location wasn't isolated at all, Agatha Christie often used elements to make it so. A sudden storm that makes communication with the outside world impossible. Heavy snowfall that delays the arrival of the police, so that the detective present can of course solve the case before they do. The clever choice of setting and location is key to many of the success of Agatha Christie's stories. It adds a feeling of suspense, of dread, of excitement. She truly was the queen of the closed quarter mystery, but that wasn't the only trick she had up her sleeve. Now, the characters in many of Agatha Christie's books are exactly the opposite of her settings. While the setting is often complicated and full of depth, her characters tend to be a bit two-dimensional, a bit flat even. And they are often nothing more than worn-down archetypes and clichés. The retired army man, the wealthy, sour and old noblewoman, the young and springy, somewhat rebellious dilettante. Her characters can often be described in a single sentence, and by hearing it, you already know everything there is to know about them. But why did she do this? Lazy writing? Well, hardly so. And these somewhat flat characters are indeed intentional. By using these simple archetypes, these clichés of characters, she provides her readers with a list of usual suspects. And this is where she tricks you. You see, Agatha Christie was a master at misdirection, and one of her favorite tricks was to use the reader's own prejudices against them. From the moment you think you know everything there is to know about a certain character, well, that's when she surprises you and turns things upside down. A great example of this technique we find in The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Now, at the center of this mystery there is a very common situation: domestic strife. The head of the family gets murdered, surrounded by their family, and each of the family members has a certain reason to kill them. Agatha Christie knew that in such a situation the usual suspect would be the husband, so she created a character that could very well be the murderer. A younger man living off the wealth of his wife, possibly unfaithful and hated by the family. Agatha Christie keeps on heaping suspicion onto the poor Alfred Inglethorpe. After all, it couldn't be that easy, could it? Agatha Christie uses the instinct of her readers against them. It is almost a magic trick. All of the focus goes to this hand, while the other does the actual sleight of hand. Now, I do have to say that it is this typecasting, these prejudices, that are often cited as the main critique of Agatha Christie's works today. Many of the prejudices she used against her audience back then, we would find today outdated and even harmful stereotypes against gender or ethnicity. Now, although many of her characters could be called flat and two-dimensional, she always worked very hard to give them an authentic feel. And to do so, she closely observed the people around her and always tried to listen into random conversations that were happening all around her. From her biography, we know that she used to carry lots of notebooks where she noted down all of these snippets of conversations and special characteristics of people that she met. And once home, at her writing table, she would take all of these erratic ideas and snippets and names and ideas for poisons and start combining them into a story, into a plotline. In fact, it was her second novel, The Secret Adversary, that originated from overhearing a conversation in a tea shop. She once admitted in an interview that two people were talking at a table nearby discussing someone called Jane Fish. That, I thought, would be the great beginning of a story. A name overheard at a tea shop. An unusual name, so that whoever heard it would remember it. Now, of course, she switched all of these elements around because, let's be honest, no one wants to recognize themselves in the murder victim in the next novel. Jane Fish became Jane Finn, but it does add to the credibility and the everyday normality of the situations that she often wrote about. And that wasn't the only thing that felt recognizable to her readers. Writing mystery novels is often an act of balance. On the one hand, you don't want to make a transparent and easy to solve mystery, but on the other hand, you don't want to write that book that is so complicated that you will lose half of your readers halfway through. So how did she strike that balance? Well, through her language. Agatha Christie was known for her everyday and very common language. She was not a literary writer. She used very simple, everyday words without many flourishes and even a very restricted vocabulary. Comparative literary studies between Agatha Christie's works and that of other famous mystery writers like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even showed that she hardly ever used synonyms. Where other writers would use words like he answered, he replied, he retorted, he rebuked, Agatha Christie would simply say, he said. Her dialogues are quick, easy and never hard to follow. And by doing so, her books become very recognizable to people. The people in the books talk like people every day do, in simple conversational language. But, again, this simplicity is intentional. It allows the reader to focus on solving the mystery and following the trail of clues that was carefully laid about. That's right, Agatha Christie wanted you to solve the mystery. She wanted you to have all of the clues, just not understand them and just slap yourself at the end of the book when you seem to have missed things. And this brings us to another element in our secret formula, the mystery. This brings us to something where Agatha Christie truly was unique for her time and age. She wanted you to have all of the clues. She wanted you to have an honest chance at solving the puzzle, solving the mystery yourself. And in doing so, she was breaking an unwritten rule about murder mysteries. If you look again at Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Holmes, you never as a reader get all of the clues. You, as the reader, are just along for the ride as the famous detective solves it all and then at the end of the story just explains to you as if you were a child on how he did it. But not with Agatha Christie mysteries. But Bart, I hear you say, I was never able to solve any of the mysteries before the end of the book. Well, that's because she knew how to write her clues. You see, a good clue is a clue that you'll probably remember but fail to understand. Again, misdirection is key here. You might think you recognize something as a clue leading to a certain character, only to have it revealed to be just circumstantial or even placed there to frame someone. Yet, throughout the story, since you are collecting clues for yourself, you are hooked. You yourself have become the detective in some way and you're trying to solve the puzzle that she has laid out before you. And yes, of course you're going to finish this book because you want to know if you were right all along. And Agatha Christie delivers this explanation in a very Agatha Christie way. The exposé. Even if you have read only a few Agatha Christie novels, you'll be familiar with this scene. The detective, whomever it is, summons all of the suspects into a single room. And then and there they start to explain how the mystery was unraveled and who in the end the murderer is. She will even often use a secondary character, for example Captain Hastings in Poirot's case, to wonder at certain misdirections and certain red herrings so she can explain to them and you as a reader where you failed. In a way, the end of the novel, this exposé, is your scorecard. You as a reader can check off and see how well or how poorly you did. And of course it is the iconic ending of Murder on the Orient Express that summarizes all of these notions. In the end, Hercule Poirot summons all of the suspects, all of the passengers on the train together into one single carriage, and he starts to explain, he starts to solve the puzzle. And it is then and there that we as readers suddenly realize that we've been had. We thought we knew about a murder mystery. Our own prejudices of there being one, maybe two perpetrators has been used against us. 12 murderers is absolutely unheard of, but it is when Hercule Poirot starts to reveal and show where the pieces of the puzzle fit together that it all becomes clear. All that is left is the moral dilemma. Should they all be punished? And of course, the reader's astonishment. And speaking of Hercule Poirot, let's talk about the last element of our secret sauce, the detective. Now, Agatha Christie created many investigators, from the elusive and mysterious Harley Quinn up to the interpret duo of Tommy and Tuppence. But of course, there are two that are ever so famous. Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple. Now, what is very interesting about many of our detectives is that they are almost anti-heroes. They often come from an underdog position. Hercule Poirot is a Belgian refugee and Miss Jane Marple is an elderly woman. They don't carry any arms, they can't fight like Holmes did, and they can easily be overpowered by any criminal that chooses to. So what is it that makes them so effective and so well loved? Well, their secret lies within their eccentricities. Agatha Christie's detectives and investigators are eccentric, quirky, and often underestimated. And this is, of course, extra fun for us as readers, because we know that Aunt Jane isn't just sitting there knitting in the corner. No, she's solving the murder before the police even does. And yes, they are brilliant minds, but they are also very human. They have their eccentricities, their quirks, and their faults. In the end, we root even for someone as arrogant and full of himself as little Hercule Poirot. And of course, they are also often accompanied by secondary characters. And it is this support cast that allows them to shine even more. We as readers can often identify much more with one of the secondary characters, like Captain Hastings, for example, because we too have got no clue what's going on. He has seen and witnessed the same clues as we did, but in the end it'll be Poirot who solves the case. Thank you for joining me in unraveling Agatha Christie's mysteries. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up and do subscribe for more bookish content. And now I'd love to hear your thoughts. What is your favorite Agatha Christie novel? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you're up for some more mysterious Agatha Christie content, well, you can always watch this video. Thanks for joining me, see you next week.